Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. Yeah, welcome back to Matter of Facts. I am back behind the mic with Andrew. I am dying of the man cold, but I'm going to soldier through and try to put on a show for y'all tonight that doesn't involve me coughing myself to death. If I can pull that off for the next 45 to 50 minutes.
I really feel like we should get you the meme of but did you die? Because you just contradicted yourself there.
Yeah. I mean, no one has
the man cold, it's called the man cold because you act like you're dying when you're really just stuffy.
Yeah, I have not yet figured out like why it is that people with men with the man cold turn into such wretched babies at the first drop of a sniffle and a cough, but it is a vibe. It's not a vibe, but it happens.
Just up your whiskey intake. Kill
Maybe
that
that's the whole
you.
problem. I need to drown the germs in whiskey. Andrew, that might work.
I did that in college one time, and I still think it works. I was like, I can't remember what it was I was sick with, but I don't remember what it was I was sick with, but I remember I was really sick, and I just upped my intake of whiskey and drank a lot, and I was better. Like I felt completely better within like the last within a day or two. So I'm holding it that the whiskey helped. I doubt it. Science has not proven it yet. But who listens to science nowadays? So we just make our own opinions.
Science also says that Rice Krispie treats are healthier to eat than ribeye steak. So I'm kind of losing a lot of faith in science these days.
Yeah.
So the title of the episode is Playing with Adult Legos, which I humorously wrote as a reference to, AR-15s and the wonderful world of building them from scratch, because they are literally adult Legos. Like, there's almost nothing you can't find to put on an AR. And Daniel Beatty is in our comments saying, stay away from Jim Beam. Oh my God. That is a bad memory. I don't drink. Jim Beam and I are not on speaking terms. Me and his buddy Jack Daniels, kind of, sort of, but definitely not Jim Beam.
Yeah, that's me and Jose. Jose kicked my butt. Like, he sucker punched me one night, and I still haven't recovered. But I guess I should have. I mean, you posted pictures of yours. You brought your pictures of yours. I guess I could have probably threw pictures of mine in, but it is what it is.
I mean,
we don't need to see the interwebs doesn't need to see what I have.
Yeah, well, both of ours are legal for legal purposes. But anyway, I think the place to start, though, is to talk about this concept of building versus buying, which actually one of our patrons recently brought up with us. He kind of asking is in the vein of, do you build or do you buy? Mm-hmm. And you and I did not see 100% eye to eye on that, which shouldn't come as a massive surprise because we don't agree about quite a few things. But it's all about the why behind it sometimes. So, like, my way of looking at building versus buying when it comes to ARs really comes down to, like, what level of investment are you willing to make? Which isn't monetary, it's attention. So, like, if you buy, I would argue, like, a mid-tier plus rifle. So, no, we're not talking about, like, the poverty ponies, the super cheap stuff. We're talking about, like, spend $800 to $1,000 on an AR-15. And we're just talking about the rifle. We're not talking about optics and all the other stuff that adds cost. Like $800 to $1,000, somewhere in there, you can get pretty decent. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah.
Now, at that price point, I fully expect this AR to be properly gassed. I expect it to have a nice, consistent ejection pattern. I expect it to run. I don't expect it to rip the rim of cases off. I don't expect it to misbehave or have issues with double feeds, jams, or anything else. I expect the thing to just munch ammo and spit it out. And at that price point, I feel like that's reasonable and rational. The problem comes in that if you are going to build the rifle yourself, you're responsible for all that. So you're now in the driver's seat of, you put this thing together. If it's overgassed, you have to recognize and remediate that. If it's undergassed, if the ejection pattern is a little wonky, if anything about this rifle is not behaving itself, you have to be willing to invest the time and the attention and the effort into figuring out, diagnosing, and remediating the problem so you have a reliable firearm. So, like, to me, I don't like using cost necessarily as the dividing line because, yes, you could spread out the cost of building a rifle over time, but you could also save your money for 6 months and accomplish the same thing buying. But to me, it comes down to are you willing to put the effort in to make sure the gun runs right? And if you're not, I say go buy one mid tier better and then accessorize to your heart's content. But if, like me, you're even remotely mechanically, like if you can tie your shoes, you can assemble an AR-15. It's not that hard. But it's a time of it's an attention investment thing, from my perspective. What do you think?
I mean, I do agree with you to a point. If you have the money, and I mean, I look at it at a monetary value, and I also look at it at a just what do you like, what you want. And mine, when I built all of mine, it was monetary, and it was with a purpose. So if you're going to spend $1,000 on a rifle, that's great. If you have that, to spend drop right now, do it. Cool, that's awesome. But if you my where I get to where going off of building versus that is, if you decided to, you get this rifle and the first thing you do is you're like, well, I'm swapping the trigger out. Oh, I'm going to swap the muzzle brake. Oh, I'm going to swap the rail. Like, you just build one. Like, now you went from a $1,000 rifle, say, to where now you're upwards to, I mean, if you get a good Geisley trigger, I mean, that's a good couple $100. If you get a good rail, I mean, those can go anywhere from, like, a decent rail can be for anywhere from like 100 to, I mean, I've seen them for 500. If it just all depends on what you want and your purpose. But you could easily rack up to just having that rifle to about 2 grand, if not more, on swapping out all kinds of parts. And that's where I say build, is because if you want to get it and you plan on just leaving it stock, and that's like, you're like, oh man, I've always wanted a BCM rifle, and you spend the money, you save up and you buy a BCM rifle, and it's exactly what you want. Great, keep it the way it is. And I mean, I'm all for that. But as soon as you want to start throwing parts on and swapping stuff out, just build a new rifle. Either build a second one, or if it's your first one, build it, and because it's just the amount of money that you're throwing in, and then the amount of spare parts that you're gonna have laying around too. After that, the other thing about building is, if you're gonna build that AR, I hope that you already have it in your mind that there's going to be troubleshooting involved. I mean, you're going into that knowing that, so that's not a big issue for me. But the thing I like about building is you can put your money where you want it at the time of, if you have $1,000 saved up and you're like, I'm going to just build and buy parts, you can pick and choose and find out, well, this I'm going to buy this barrel, this is the length I want, it's light, it's this and this. Yeah, it might be $300. Okay, well, cool, that's $300. Okay, well, I'm not really too concerned about my lower or my upper receiver, so you know what, Aero Precision, hands down, best bang for your buck. I don't need a Noveski or a BCM upper or lower receivers. I can, just get along with that. Okay, cool. Well, I want to put money in a good trigger, so I'm going to go Geisley. Okay, or a Geisley or whatever. Pick your trigger. They're just the ones that I've always went with. But yeah, I mean, so that's where mine is. I mean, I'm all for buying and that's it. But yeah, as soon as you start swapping stuff off, just build. And building is fun. It's a lot of fun to me. It's challenging. It's interesting because if you do your homework, you can buy, and you wait for sales and stuff like that. That's what I did with one of my builds. Is, hey, I'm gonna buy parts just on sale. Whenever I see Christmas sales, Thanksgiving sales, all these sales that pop up around the year, I'm gonna just buy parts. And eventually I had one, and granted I had a rifle already, but still, you can build them. I don't want to say necessarily cheaper than buying one, but you can get exactly with what you want. It's a purpose built rifle to your needs. So I think we agree, but just up to a certain point.
Yeah, it really is up to a certain point because, like, I wouldn't even dissuade a person if they bought a rifle off the rack. I wouldn't dissuade them from changing parts necessarily. I would dissuade them from getting into the barrel, the gas system, the bolt. The once you get like, because to me, what I feel like, and in my experience, what has the greatest impact on the functioning of a semi-automatic rifle are the magazines. Which anytime you have a misbehaving firearm, the very first thing you do is go get a known good magazine, shove that into it, and let's start there because magazines are usually contributing factors, if not the cause, of most misbehavior. But I would venture to say if you want to change things like the pistol grip, the stock, maybe even the rail to a degree. Although I feel like if you buy a rifle that you don't like the rail, you probably should have bought a different rifle. Not that that's a difficult thing to change, but just because it's kind of a I mean, it's a little bit of forethought to avoid having to go that far. Like if you want to decorate it with optics or I think you should put a sling on a rifle if it didn't come with one. So I guess my point of view is like there's a certain amount of accessorizing an AR I wouldn't dissuade a person from, but the minute you start playing with major components, things that I feel like directly impact the way the rifle runs, at that point I'm going to say, why didn't you just build it yourself? Because
Well,
the minute you touch the bolt, the barrel, the gas system, and the barrel is by extension part of the gas system because your gas port size, your gas port location, all that. The minute you touch any of that, you're potentially making a rifle that's not going to shoot the way the manufacturer intended it to. And you're right back in the driver's seat of having to diagnose whatever comes from those modifications you made. Which at that point, I'm just like, why didn't you just build it from scratch?
the thing is if you're gonna buy a rifle to keep stock, by all means, spend the money, save it up to buy $1,000 or so rifle. If you're gonna plan on swapping parts out and you want to start with something that has like, I mean, take. I just think of Modern Warfare, like the video game. It's like you have this rifle, then you're like accessorizing all kinds of crap. Like if you're gonna buy a rifle to accessorize and to like swap, swap triggers out and all that stuff, just go online and buy like a Ruger, buy a cheaper Ruger, buy something that's 400 or 500 bucks.
That kind of hurts my
Uh,
heart a little bit to have Ruger referred to as a cheap rifle.
yeah, well, now you see who bought them. So, but or no, that was Remington. Sorry, not Ruger.
Okay, I'll give you
But
that one.
yeah, so if you sit there but if you want to swap parts out, or if you plan on swapping anything out, triggers, I don't care what it is, if you any parts at all, just buy a cheaper rifle. Spend $500 or $600 on a rifle versus 1,000 because you're gonna have $1,000 into it before you know it. So
Yeah. Now, I will say the title at the bottom says building with a purpose, although this kind of applies to buying too, to be honest, to me. Because, like, you know, Andrew, you and I have talked about this, especially for the audience, multiple times over the years. Like, I'm not a firearms collector necessarily. I buy guns because they have a purpose to me, because they fit a use case. There's nothing I own well, there's a couple I own that have some sentimental value, but by far and large, I don't buy a gun because I want to shoot it. I buy a gun because it does something that the rest of the guns I have don't do as well. So, like, I say build with a purpose, buy with a purpose. Like, if you're going to build your own AR, it makes sense that you sit down and you first ask yourself, what do I want this thing to do? And that becomes your guidepost for what parts you pursue, what you put into it, where you put most of your money. Because, like you said earlier, you might, based on, let's say, a theoretical accuracy you're chasing, you might be perfectly comfortable with like 3 MOA, 3 minutes about a 3 inch group at 100 yards. And if you can accept that, there's very little to be bought by putting in a crazy expensive match barrel that's going to be heavier and it's going to cost a lot more when that it wildly exceeds your accuracy target. You could spend that money somewhere else that would be more to your use case. Now, this might sound like needlessly nerdy, but I am needlessly nerdy about these kinds of things. Like I've built 2 ARs, and both times I sat down to build, I sat down with a plan, I researched every part, purchased most of those parts all at exactly the same time. Like I didn't come into this and say, like randomly grab stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like I came into this and said I'm building this to do a very specific thing, and if it doesn't help me do that thing, I don't want it in the rifle. Does that sound like needlessly nerdy,
No, just needlessly, like
pedantic?
you're putting you're buying the best quality part that you can find for your need. I mean, I'm a gun collector. I'll buy. I mean, I've slowed down on buying because I've been putting money into my truck, just getting that ready for camping and stuff like that. But uh, I I'll buy something and and just because I think I like it, and then down the road I might sell it, which I haven't sold very many guns because that's blasphemy, and I try to stay away from that kind of crap. But
Well,
I
that the
mean,
ATF now says you have to have an FFL to sell guns. But please
yeah.
continue.
So I mean, but like my 6.5 Creedmoor bolt action Savage. I mean, I bought that because I want a gun that could reach out to 1,000 yards if I need it. And granted, I've never needed it. Do I need it? Will I ever need it? Probably not. Have I trained on it? No. That's going to change hopefully this summer with a couple classes I have in mind. But uh, my 4570 lever action, I bought that. I mean, it's a straight wall cartridge, which where I live in Michigan, there's a stupid line, imaginary line, to where if you go above that line, you can hunt with a rifle cartridge, such as a 30-06, stuff like that. If you go below that line, they call it the shotgun line, basically, where you can hunt muzzleloader, shotgun, or straight wall cartridge. So I bought the 4570. Well, I've always wanted a 4570, but I bought it for the intention of hunting down more south of Michigan. Now, actually, I just shot a doe a couple weeks ago up at my parents'. So they're above the line. I brought it because where I was sitting, there's a lot of brush, and it's thick. 300 grain 4570 projectile punches right through a lot of that stuff without many issues. In fact, the doe I shot through some thick brush, and she dropped in her tracks. Granted, the heart shot that the taking out the top of the heart that did a good job too, but I've seen them run for a very long time on nothing, on no heart at all. So it put her down right away, and the hole was about the size of a quarter, which was pretty crazy. But and then I got a 30-30 lever action. My one of my bucket list guns is a 357 lever action. And so I'm a gun collector, but I do think that people should have some purpose built stuff, purpose built rifles, and whether that's a lever action, whether that is a bolt action, semi-auto, like an AR platform, whatever it is, if just it's a purpose built rifle is great, especially with the ARs being what they are, being Legos basically, and you having a 10.5 inch truck gun, something that's small, if it's in a 5.56 caliber, 300 blackout, what have you, having that ability to maneuver with a shorter barrel is awesome. Try to take a 10.5 inch barrel and clear your house, and then take a 16-inch rifle and do the same. It can be done, and with practice, it can be done. I've done it, but it's just a little bit harder. You have to be more mindful of the extra 6 inches. Plus, if you have a suppressor like I do, that extra 5 to 6 inches of the suppressor. So now you're looking at a 20-inch, 21-inch long gun, which you run to other issues on that. But yeah, purpose built. Uh, I would say everybody should have at least a couple good purpose built rifles or shotguns. I mean, you can definitely purpose build a shotgun too, which I have. So
Now, the one thing I want to warn people of before we get into like specific, because I recently started doing some modifications to my two ARs recently. I haven't touched much gun related in over a year, but suddenly got back into it. But scope creep, and this has nothing to do with like rifle scopes. So the one thing I want to try to caution people against is this idea that I build this farm to do a thing, and then I want to do this and this and this and this and this and this and that and that. And then before you know it, the rifle is not good at anything because it is so wildly compromised in trying to fill every freaking mission there is. And that is not just like firearms. You could apply that to all kinds of different things. But it's the idea that like scope creep is something that happens. It happens in any kind of project management. Is something we have to push back against all the time. Say, this is what we set out to do. This is what we set out to build. And if we want to keep moving this line, sooner or later you're going to get to the point where the thing you built won't do anything because you've compromised it so awfully. So
Yeah.
anybody that's anybody that's ever seen like the Mall Ninja specials, the ARs with like the 5 tactical lights and the 2 slings and the 4 optics stacked up on top of each other, like there's a meme there, and it's funny. It's a funny meme, but there's also some truth to it when you see somebody that like they keep throwing parts at their rifle because they wanted to do new things, not realizing that the part you just threw at it made it to where it wouldn't do the first thing that you built it for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's my AR. It's dedicated. I mean, I built it when I first started building it. I built it in mind to for night vision. I knew I was going to get into it, so I started with a higher mount, a higher red dot mount, stuff like that. So, and it's dedicated to that's the rifle I grab if I'm running my nods. Now, like the shotgun that I have an RMR on my shotgun, and I have it set up to where it's a good it's a battle shotgun. I mean, it's something that I would take with me if I had to. But is it good for nods? I've tried and I've been trying to train with it under nods. And I mean, the nicest thing about shotguns is if you point in that general direction, hopefully something's going to hit. But still, trying to get that red dot into the line of sight for in the view, it's hard. But you know, so yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want something. I mean, I'm all for multiple rifles. So if you have to build multiple rifles to stay away from the scope creep, and to say, hey, I got this one for this reason and this one for this reason, I don't care. You can have 15 different rifles, all for a different purpose, and that's fine with me.
Yeah, I guess my way of thinking is like you're more likely to be in that situation and that be a workable situation than you are to have the one rifle to rule them all. So I'm throwing this up on the screen, and for those of you that are listening to this in audio, you really should check us out on YouTube and Rumble every now and then, because sometimes we do episodes where we talk through images, and that's where this kind of thing comes in. But basically, this is just pictures of the 2 ARs that I've built, both of which have had some recent modifications. Because to kind of talk y'all through where I started with this, when I first built the very first rifle, which is actually the one on bottom, that rifle originally was meant to be the one rifle to rule them all. It was the only AR I had, and it was meant to kind of be the jack of all trades. So at the time, it was built on pretty much the same platform it is now. It's Aero Precision uppers and lowers, because like Andrew said earlier, like there's a really fine delta point between cost and performance, and Aero Precision is that for uppers and lowers as far as I'm concerned. So Aero Precision uppers and lowers, Aero Precision rail. I think Toolcraft bolts is what I've always used, because dirty little secret, Toolcraft makes a lot of the bolts you're buying for more money than Toolcraft charges that has other people's logo put on it. Don't believe me? Do some looking into it. Had an 18-inch Faxon barrel in it and a little bit of Magpul furniture. Nothing really special. ALG ACT trigger, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say that, like, within the mil-spec trigger arena, ALG's ACT is really hard to beat dollar for performance. I mean, I've shot some really janky, clapped out M16s in my life. And the ALG ACT right out of the box, it's a very, very nice upgrade over a mil-spec trigger for not a lot of money.
I mean, it is a Geisley, so
Yeah, it is basically a Geisley on a budget. And originally, when I built this rifle, it did not have that 1.6 LPVO on it. It actually had the Vortex Strike Fire that's now on the other rifle. So that whole rifle was built to be kind of like the jack of all trades. And then sometime later, I built another one to build at the time. It was built as an AR pistol. So had a stabilizing brace, had a Sylvan Arms folder on it, had a 10.5-inch Faxon barrel in it, Same upper, same lower, same rail, just a little bit short, a few inches shorter rail on the pistol. Um, had a CAC can on it. I want to say it was like a 3.5 inch, and that was just to kind of direct all the blast forward from that 10.5 inch pistol barrel. And same ALG ACT trigger in it. And at that time, I pulled the Strike-Fire 2 red dot and the magnifier off of the 18-inch rifle I built, put it on that, and I put the 1-6 on the 18-inch rifle. And that is as these two stayed for quite a few years. The the AR pistol was built kind of to be a truck gun. When I go on long trips, especially in the truck, I had built this thing to just perfectly fit, folded up into the storage area in the back of a Tacoma. You know what I'm saying, Andrew? Like behind the passenger rear seat, that kind of longer storage area, it fit into there like a glove with a couple of spare magazines. And it was built as my truck gun. And then sometime later, I got another firearm that really fits the truck gun a little bit better for my uses. So I had this extra AR sitting here that kind of wanted to occupy the same space as another firearm I bought, the Scorpion. And then someone smooth talked me into dipping my toe into night vision, and I realized that in order to have a firearm that was going to play in the dark, one of these two had to undergo some kind of modifications. And since I no longer needed to have a very, very short folding AR for a truck gun, it kind of gave me the impetus to turn what was the AR pistol into a good old what is commonly referred to in firearm circles as a GPR, general purpose rifle. So I ripped the whole thing apart, stuck a 16-inch Faxon barrel into it. Just got a birdcage flash hider on it because why not? I mean, the freaking things are cheap as hell and they work great. Ended up putting a Bobo engineering riser on it to jack the entire optic stack up, I think 3/4 of an inch, which gave me the center line that I really kind of need for messing with night vision. Put a stock on it, ditched the folder because honestly, the folder was adding over 2 inches length of pull to it. And I don't know. I mean, at the moment that I got away from this thing needing to be as compact as possible as a truck gun, I also kind of got to the mode of just make this thing into a carbine. Don't care if it folds. It is going to be as long as it's going to be. Eliminate a failure point. I've still got the Sylvan Arms folder lying around just in case I ever need it for something. But that's kind of where I wound up. And obviously, I ended up putting a laser module, a Holosun LS321, which we never did get to compare my LS321 to your Steiner toe-to-toe at Prepper Camp, but I was reasonably impressed with the Holosun Lamb. I mean, I think the performance for what it cost is not unreasonable at all.
No, just when China attacks, they're just going to shut your stuff off.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I mean, before we know it, Prepper Camp 2024 will be here, so maybe we'll get another chance. But yeah, no, I mean that's a good purpose-built rifle, really. I mean, so
yeah. The about the only thing that's still pending on this is I really want to swap out this rail-mounted Streamlight light with a probably an Arasaka, so that it's compatible with like all the Surefire's tail caps and clean up the switchology. Because right now I'm just running two separate pressure pads back to back or nose to butt on top of this rail, and it works. It's not the greatest setup.
it takes a lot of space, though.
It does take a lot of space, and it's just like I said, it's not the cleanest. It's not the cleanest way to do this. Not to mention, like you could see this. That's actually an Arasaka. I think that's called
Scout.
No. The little thing on the bottom of the rail.
Oh, the little nub. Yeah, I got one of those too. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, those are nice.
I want to say they call it the finger stop. I can't recall.
Probably.
But anyway, it's from Arasaka. But the whole point is that you basically put it between like two of your fingers and it works as an index point for your hand, so it always goes back in the same spot. And I know that if I land that right between my ring finger and my middle finger on either hand, my thumb is sitting directly between the two pressure pads. So I push my thumb forward, I hit the laser, pull it back a little bit, I hit the light. It doesn't require me to change my grip, but it's still not as nice and clean and ergonomic as it could be. So the switchology will be getting cleaned up at some point. But other than that,
Need a suppressor.
yeah, well, see, remember that whole discussion about building with a purpose? I had the thought of getting one of Faxon's 14.5 inch barrels that has their built-in three-prong flash suppressor, so that I would have like 16-inch overall, but I wouldn't have a 16-inch barrel plus a bird cage on the end of it. And the reason I didn't is because I think at some point in the future I'm going to finally cave in and pay the bribery money for a suppressor. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean that's why I for the years of building, that's why I went 16-inch, just because of I wasn't sure what. So I knew I was going to get a suppressor. I wasn't sure which one, especially because my first suppressor was an AAC 30 caliber, and so I had everything set up to where I could just throw that on really any of my rifles. But now I have a Surefire 5.56, so I'll probably swap out the barrel on my 5.56 to like a 13.7 or something, and then get the War Comp, which I have. I mean, the War Comp muzzle brake and get it pin and welded so that it is it's to 16 inches, and then obviously that'll save me a couple inches or so. But yeah, I mean that's the reason why I didn't go pin weld, just because of the fact that I didn't know what suppressor I was going to end up with. And then of course a lot of them, they're not all direct thread, so they have their adapters and all that stuff. So the nice thing though is there is a suppressor. I cannot think of the name off the top of my head, but there is a suppressor out there that does connect to a bird cage. There is
I
one. So
I have seen it. I cannot think of
yeah,
the manufacturer to save my natural life, but I've seen it. Pretty cool lockup actually on that
yeah,
thing. I mean, it's one of those things that's like it's gonna drive me crazy. As soon as we're done with the show, I'm gonna have to find it. But I remember looking at it and I thought to myself, I'm like, that is so unnervingly simple. I wonder why somebody else didn't think it up before these guys. You know what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
It's clever. So yeah, that's what I wound up. This is what I took a 10.5 inch, very purpose built pistol and ripped it apart and salvaged the upper, the lower, the rail, the bolt, and rebarreled it, changed the furniture, and this is what I wound up turning it into. Is just a good old fashioned general purpose rifle that can play in the dark. And then
It's hold on, sorry. It's the I believe it is the Griffin Armament.
that sounds familiar.
GPN Griffin Armament A2 attachable 5.56 suppressor.
That does sound familiar.
Yeah, so I think that's what it is. $745. It's actually
That's
not too
not
bad.
awful, honestly.
No. Anyway, as you were.
So, what the hell is an SPR? And we have actually debated this quite enthusiastically recently in the Signal chat, which is just for the patrons. And if you're a patron and you're not in the Signal chat, you should be. And if you want to be in the Signal chat, you got to have a talk with me about becoming a donating member. But anyway, we had a good old chat about what an SPR was. And, our resident firearms nerd historian, Stewart, was standing there next to Stoner when he thought up the freaking AR-15. Old fart. I love you, Stewart, but I got to give you hell. It's part of the gig. But, he pointed out to us that SPR is actually comes from like DOD. Like they have a specific use case for what designates an SPR, and in the broader firearms, community, an SPR is pretty universally understood to be something that shoots an intermediate cartridge. So we're not talking about battle rifles, we're not talking about designated marksman rifles, we're not talking about sniper rifles, we're not talking about something that's shooting 30 cal short action or long action. We're talking about something that shoots ostensibly 5.56 that has a little bit longer barrel, a little bit longer legs, a little bit more magnification than average, so that it can push out a little bit farther, but something that still uses the same ammo and the same mags as everything else, ostensibly in a squad. Like that's where this philosophy comes from. Is that you take an SPR and you embed it into a squad of, say, M4 carbines with 14.5-inch barrels, so that one person has the ability to reach out and touch somebody a little bit further away. From my point of view, and this is kind of where I would love to say this rifle is pretty much done, but I don't know if it is. I've done. I took it from what it already was, which the only thing I've changed recently has been the trigger and the bipod, and I added the bipod, and that's really been more to kind of lean this thing more into being an SPR because I already have a really well built, very functional general purpose rifle. I don't need two of them, and this thing already having an 18-inch barrel, it's already got a little bit more legs. But I put a Magpul bipod on it mostly because I mean, I've shot with a bipod and I've shot without. And in my opinion, it definitely helps me with the consistency over range. And the Magpul bipod is both very affordable and fairly lightweight. I don't care if it's an Atlas. I don't care if it's like not the most rock solid bipod out there. It's all cost performance to weight. And I didn't want anything hinging way out there on the end of the rail that was going to be super, super heavy, just in case I needed to pick this thing up and shoot it offhand. But I also recently changed out the trigger, and you and I were talking about this. I put a Trigger Tech trigger into it, which I had never heard of Trigger Tech until Stewart kind of talked me through them, and I did some research, and really, really interesting trigger design. The short version is what they do is between the two sear surfaces, they actually have a roller bearing, so that instead of where most triggers, the way they operate is they drag two metal parts against each other, and then when they clear each other, that's what releases the sear, releases the hammer, releases the striker. So you have friction between these parts, and no matter how well you polish them, you're gonna have some friction. And in order to ensure that the firearm is drop safe, you have to have enough sear engagement that a serious drop can't make those parts jump apart. What Trigger Tech has done with this roller bearing and the way they've very finely controlled the geometry is that the the trigger has, and I've spent some time like meditating over it, trying it. I do not perceive any creep in this trigger, any at all. I mean, but as soon as you realize it's moving, you let the hammer loose. So it's got a very very good trigger in it. I ended up getting the Trigger Tech Duty 3.5 pound single stage because two stage triggers just work my nerves, and I couldn't explain to you why. Just give it to me. Don't make me explain why. I don't like two stage triggers. I don't mind anybody that does like them. I just can't do them. They give me the heebie-jeebies. And I don't even mind, like I wouldn't have minded if it had a 5 pound trigger in it. I really appreciate the fact that it's not a creepy trigger. I'm not, you and I were talking about this. I'm not super carried away with the reset on it though, which is kind of going to be goes back to that whole building with a purpose thing. Like when I think back to like the Timney trigger that I have in my Scorpion, and I understand that's a different trigger manufacturer and a you know, completely different platform, but that has both a very very tiny amount of creep with a very short reset and a very definite reset. This has no creep, little bit of over travel for being honest, but the reset is really 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 soft, which if this were going to be like a GPR or a running gun type of weapon, I would be really unhappy with the trigger. But in something that ostensibly I intend to shoot like off of barricades or off of a bipod most of the time, the weak reset doesn't bother me as bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, that's the thing is it's just going to take time to get out and shoot it and figure out what you like about it. And if you do like it, and then keep it and then keep using it and stuff like that. I prefer with a more of a precision AR. I mean, I guess can't really precision ARs. I mean, they're not, nothing will get as precise as like a bolt action, but I mean, my AR-10, I have a Geisley 2 stage in it, and that trigger is amazing. I prefer the 2-stage, but that's me. So,
Mm.
but yeah, no, I mean, yeah, just do some load development for it or whatever. Find out what it likes to eat, and then go from there.
Which kind of brings us around to, I guess, probably the last little piece of this topic, unless we figure out some other place to stick our noses. But when I talk about build or buy, I also apply that to ammunition because I do my own reloading. And the thing about doing your own ammunition reloading means it once again. Are you the kind of person that just wants to go buy 1,000 rounds and trust that the manufacturer's built it properly, it's properly loaded, buy the thing that suits your purpose, put it in the gun, and then let it eat? Or are you the person that wants to invest, that's looking for, say, better performance or better cost or something, and you're willing to invest your time into it, and you're also willing to invest your time if it doesn't work the way you expected it to? Because, like, I my last big ammunition project was this little image over here on the right. The one on the left is the ammunition project I'm getting ready to embark on. So I have two principal loads for 5.56 already loaded. They're both 55 grains. I've got a can of 55 grain open tip soft points, which I had them. I mean, I had the bullets and I already had a load for them that worked fairly well. So I just went ahead and loaded up a bunch. I think I've got 600 or 700 of them at this point. I actually flirted with the idea. In the near future, I'm probably going to be helping a family member do some hog eradication on their property. And I considered bringing these soft points out. I am back and forth on that because my concern is like from what he's told me, these pigs are not massive. They're around 50 pounds. And I would imagine if I whack one in the skull with a 55 grain soft point going like 2,800 plus feet per second, I will probably have no problem taking its legs out from underneath it. But then it makes me wonder if I should stick to a 55 grain FMJ. You know what I'm saying? Just to make sure the bullet stays together. Because I worry about what happens if this soft point encounters something hard enough that it just shreds.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, this was years ago now, but I read an article where the guys that they used green tip on hogs, but
Yeah,
I've
I
never I've
mean,
never hunted hogs, so I have no idea. I mean that I built a 300 blackout because I was planning on going hog hunting, and then I never did. So,
well,
but
my wife's uncle just popped one on his property a couple weeks ago with a 55 grain FMJ, and he said
oh, well, if that works. It works.
he said he hit it and it didn't even move. It just slumped straight down to the ground.
Yeah, if it works, it works. So
Yeah, I mean, if I were out shooting like in West Texas where they have hogzillas, I'd be a little bit concerned about a 55 grain 5.56. I think what we have around here, I don't think I'll run into any trouble. But the problem is we're going to be hunting them at night, so I really only have one night option available to me, and that is an AR-15. If I do this often enough, I've actually been looking at barns. They make the TSX in several grain weights from the 60 range up into the high 70s. That might be worth to have a nice all copper bullet that'll penetrate a little deeper, put a little bit more energy into the target. But these are the things you do when you're reloading is you select the powder charge that is the most optimal for your operating system and your barrel. You select the bullet that does the thing you want. You have the ability to tune the load. This picture on the right is just kind of an illustration of like what load tuning does. Because my experience with these two facts and barrels in my ARs so far has been that with shooting like offhand at 100 yards, I mean, I'm good for about a 4 or 5 inch group. On a bipod, I imagine I can tighten it up a little bit more. And with some prodigious load development, I have talked to a few people who use these same fags and gunner barrels that say that they'll shoot one MOA if you find the right load for them. So that's why I've got several boxes of 77 grain Sierra Match Kings to start doing some load development for. And what I did, because like you, Andrew, you know that when you're doing load development, one of the things you need to pay attention to is make sure that all your cases are the same head stamp, right? Because all your brass manufacturers, they're all just a little bit different, and if your case volume's different, it for the same powder volume, it's going to change your velocities. It's going to introduce another variable. So what I did was I actually took a whole bunch of cases because I get just boxes of used 556 brass. I got a box full of this stuff, and I actually like put them on a scale, zeroed it, filled them up to the top with water, and then weighed the amount of water all these different cases took so that I could reliably figure out after they'd all been resized so that I knew the outside dimension was exactly the same. I was really just measuring what the inside volume was. And then I was able to say these 4 head stamps are all the exact same volume. These 2 or 3 head stamps are outside of the bell curve. So now I don't know exactly which case those are. I've got it written in my notes, but I know that as long as I grab case heads that are any of those 4, they are the same water volume. They are the same brass thickness. I can now pick through all my loose brass and say these 4 head stamps are the ones that I'm using for my match load for a 77 grain Sierra Match King. I don't know. We'll wait and see how that turns out when I get done with that reloading project. I know that when I got my Ruger M77, the 308 Winchester, like that rifle shot about a 3-inch group with off the shelf ammo at 100 yards. I mean, it's a hunting rifle. It's not really meant to be a tack driver. I did a little bit of work to the rifle, which really was just clearancing the stock a little bit so that it wasn't like pushing against the barrel real hard, you know what I'm saying? Try to let the barrel's natural harmonics like sort themselves out. And I polished up the sear surfaces on the trigger a little bit just to take some of the grit out of it. And then I sat down and did load development using 3 different powders and 2 different bullets over the course of a few months. And what I finally settled on was that 42.5 grains of IMR 4064 under 168 grain Sierra Match King will make 4 bullets touch at 100 yards. And that's where I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So, like we've talked about reloading before, like for me, I get really, I don't know what the word is. I really kind of roll my eyes hard at the idea that we're going to reload to save money because unless you bought components like 10 years ago when they were a lot cheaper than they are now, it's really hard to beat prices if you have to go out and find your bullets and find your powder and, God forbid, sell your kidneys so you can get primers. But what you can do is you can create ammunition that is more accurate in your weapon system than anything you'll buy off the shelf. And to me, that is always going to be the benefit, is that I can make the ammo to do exactly what I want it to do. I can make it to exactly the barrel harmonics I'm going to fire it through. I can tailor it exactly to the use case that I'm after. In this case, I'm seeking ultimate accuracy. In the case of if I go back to load some of those Barnes TSXs for hog hunting, I'm trying to smash a hog's brains out. Like, no 2 ways about it. I want maximum lethality for pigs. But you get to make those decisions, and it puts you back in the driver's seat of saying, do I want to build it or do I want to buy it? Do I want to take the time to make this thing do exactly what I want it to do? Or do I just buy some off the shelf and hope it works? It comes down to a time investment for me, time and attention.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, that's the same thing with me. Is I just don't have the time to get into reloading, so I'll just buy it, and it's easier for me. It's less of a headache to buy the ammo that I like, that I know that the rifle shoots, than to reload. And I mean, but the thing is, those I do have reloading components for like my 6.5 and stuff like that, because I do have a round that I found that it's a I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe it's Hornady, but it's 143 grain projectile or bullet, and that rifle loves that 143 grain. And so I do have some rounds, and I do have everything I need to reload a good 100 or so of those that grain weight. Do I need to sit down and do it? Yeah, I need to sit down. It's just I don't have time to. So
Hmm.
I don't. I just eat the money, and it does suck because of how expensive. I was joking around because I should have picked some up, but didn't. But I found it online for like Black Friday sales online for, it was like $35 a box of 20. That's what it was going for when I first bought my 6.5. Not on sale. They're like $55 a box now, which is ridiculous. But whatever. It is what it is. So
Yeah. Have you tried Federal Gold Medal Match Through by any chance?
no.
Give that a whirl. Federal Gold Medal Match, unless something has changed that I'm not aware of, they reload their match ammo with Sierra Match Kings, and I have. It has been a very, very rare firearm that doesn't do some of its best work with Sierra Match Kings or Federal Gold Medal Match. I don't know price wise how it's going to compare to the Hornadies you're already shooting. If it's, I'm assuming it's match ammo we're talking about, right?
Yeah. So actually, what it is I have the stuff that my rifle likes. It's 6.5 Creedmoor Precision Hunter, 143 grain is what it is.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I've turned into a Sierra Match King convert simply because like that whole low development for 308 with two different bullets. I started with Hornady, and I don't have anything bad to say about Hornady's ammunition or their bullets, except to say that my one particular rifle absolutely hates Hornady bullets. I tried Hornady AMAX. I ran a bunch of them through my rifle, trying to get that thing to group well. It did not want to. It did not want to behave itself. So I wound up switching to Sierra Match Kings, and all of a sudden I went from a rifle that I was struggling to make it group 1 inch at 100 yards. It immediately shrank down sub MOA with infinitely less aggravation.
Hmm.
Like I was at the point where I was tuning the lead and the jump to the lands like in 2 thousandths of an inch increments. Getting closer and closer and closer. I was chasing accuracy doing that nonsense, and I finally found a load that do 3/4 of an inch. And then I tried Sierra Match Kings, and those stupid things, you load them to magazine length, you throw a charge, you don't individually weigh them, and it just spits them out of the barrel 1/2 inch groups.
Hmm.
It is, again, I know that's like one rifle, that's a data point of one, but my one rifle will eat Sierra Match Kings all day long and reward you for it. And if you put hoarding into it, it's going to be a hateful pain in the ass the whole freaking time.
Hmm.
Don't understand why. Ask somebody at Ruger. I'm sure they're smarter than I am.
Well, I mean, that's just like my 308. I was shooting 175 grain Sierra Match Kings out of it. Uh, did just great. I throw Fiocchi in it, and I couldn't get it to pattern worth crap. It was all over the place with Fiocchi. So, which was really weird. But yeah, I haven't shot. I think I still have like 3 or 4 boxes of Fiocchi laying around that I have not. I just won't shoot because it. I mean, I guess I can shoot it just to play, but I don't know. So
Yeah. So I guess I'm running out of gas on the whole, built versus bought. Like again, to me, I think there's great merit in the idea of like building your own AR. I can't universally recommend it because I know I have a friend who I've helped build an AR, and like by his own admission, if I hadn't been standing there helping him do it, he would have never gotten it together by himself. So like there is a certain amount of, if you're not mechanically inclined, if you're not willing to learn how to do it, if you have like, you know, four thumbs and two left hands, maybe you don't go that direction. But I really think for the people that like, if you can tie your shoes and change your own oil, you can figure out how to build an AR. It's not complicated. Really isn't. I could teach my 11-year-old how to do it, and she's not a gun nut.
Yeah.
But well, I guess we'll keep this short and sweet. That I kind of wanted to do something gun related, and I mean, in the last several months, I have pivoted away from other prepping activities towards get these two rifles sorted out because somebody smooth talked me into getting a night vision, which is another episode you and I need to do one of these days. But with that came the fact that night vision's really cool, but all you can do is look like a moron with your friends in the dark unless you actually rig up a firearm to operate with it. And doing that then meant other changes. But I guess we'll keep it short and sweet, man. You got stuff to do. I have to go blow my nose because man cold is going to kill me otherwise. But for the listeners, for the those of you who are watching this on YouTube Rumble, like drop us a comment and tell us what you think. I'm curious who out there falls on which side of the fence as far as building versus buying an AR. And like if you're the person who says, "Oh, I'd never try to build one," my question is why? Is it like lack of knowledge? Are you intimidated by the process? Do you just think the juice is worth the squeeze? No judgment. There's no judgment here. I mean, I'll judge you a little bit, but not much. But I'm really just curious. But you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, although neither one of those are really great ways to get a hold of us these days. The contact form on our website, mofpodcast.com, does go straight to our mailboxes, and I'm usually pretty good about responding to that. And if you're a patron, you've probably texted me like 14 times since we started recording, and I'll get to y'all just as soon as I get a free second. Thank y'all for tolerating our nonsense and helping support the show. Matter of Fact's podcast going out the door. Bye, everybody.
Bye.